Chapter 2. How did it all begin? There is only pure conscious awareness. Most people call it One or God, or another name meaning the same thing depending on the belief system. God manifests universes, galaxies, worlds, and everything in them in order to play with and know itself. These are like 3D holographic images that are temporary, time and space bound, having a beginning and an ending, and are ever-changing, which gives them the appearance or illusion of a linear three-dimensional experience. God then extended a portion of itself into these holographic-like 3D density screens to fully experience itself. In order to fully experience itself, it must fall in consciousness of its Godhood. If it was aware that the experience was not real, the experience would be diminished by this knowledge. This is the beginning of the belief in separation, which further creates the illusion of limitation. This creates the illusion of boundaries around boundlessness, providing it with the opportunity to experience itself in a time and space world of constant change, where it can taste contrast. The word extended is used instead of projected, because being one, it can only extend itself to itself. The concept of projection is used by the separated false self that believes everything is outside itself. When God steps into the hologram, it tastes experience through its servants, the mind and the body, with its senses. It also experiences through every other manifested hologram, be it as simple and temporary as a soap bubble, or as complex and enduring, yet still time-bound, as a universe. The only difference between each extended hologram is the degree of conscious awareness of the God it is. The human body-mind consciousness later transforms from ignorance of its Godhood to full remembrance of who it really is. All possible experiences are created from the beginning of this game and provide what may be thought of as an infinite menu of choices. And a quote from Anita Moorjani: "Since the tapestry of all time has already been woven, everything has already been created. Everything I could ever want in my life already exists in the infinite, non-physical plane. If there's something I desire, the idea is not to go out and get it or create it, but to expand my consciousness to allow universal energy to bring it into my reality or awareness right here and now." Through the body-mind instrument, it creates nothing new. Instead, it chooses from this infinite menu of experiences that only seem to be unique creations. In truth, that individuated part of itself, the self who eternally remains conscious of its Godhood, overshadows the sleeping beauty consciousness of the separated false self, or identity, with inspirations of what to choose. This is accomplished through what I like to call the spiritual telephone line called the intuition. The intuition functions not unlike the current internet, connecting the limitation of the separated false self-identity with the virtual abundance of the God self. These choice inspirations are gradually tainted by the false self's deeper and deeper descent into the illusionary hologram as it clothes itself in more and more layers of identity or conditioning. Imagination. While the false self is unaware of the real self, the intuition is given little credit or credibility. In fact, during the long reign of the imbalanced masculine patriarchy, the intuition was largely assigned to what is considered to be the irrational and unpredictable behavior of the feminine nature. Instead, what ideas and concepts appeared in the mind were considered to be the product of the imagination, and heralded as one of the mind's greatest assets. Much has been written and taught about this mental faculty, further puffing up the false self's image of itself. Control. When the self forgets or falls in conscious awareness of its Godhood, the body-mind vehicles it uses to taste experience take over control of its experience choices. Since the hologram is an illusion or a dreamlike game God is using to play in, this concept of control is also an illusion, despite its highly convincing nature. There's only one outcome of the game, and that is the eventual return of the consciousness to full awareness of its Godhood. In this respect, the concept of free will is also seen as an illusion. The separated false self has a dream version of free will within its dream world. The fully conscious real self, who is also known as the heart or I am presence and many other names, is always in control behind the scenes of the game, but has temporarily stepped aside on the 3D level, allowing the false self, body-mind separated identity, the illusion of running the game. This illusion is a necessary requirement in order for God to fully experience itself in a temporary semi-state of ignorance. The 3D game experience. The game begins with, in, and out of God and ends there. The separated false self, body-mind identity seems to control the game but ends up in the same place aware of who it really is. Free will or fate. The 3D experience God is having as you is temporary, and anything that has a beginning and an ending is a dream or an illusion. The return to full conscious awareness of who you really are, God, is assured and will eventually happen. In fact, it has already happened beyond the time and space or 3D dimensional experience. This means, as I mentioned above, that the concept of free will is real only within the dream or illusion. You are dreaming that you have free will, and you do have it within that dream. There are some who will even tell you that planet Earth and humanity is the only free will zone in the universe. But the entire universe is also temporary, and is therefore part of the dream or illusion most people call reality. Imagine a stream that flows through a forest. The forest represents reality as it really is, and the stream represents the dream or illusion. You are a swimmer, an individuated yet one, dreaming God self who can do what he or she wishes within the stream dream. You may for a while struggle and swim upstream against the tide. You may stand in the shallow water and watch the stream dream flow by you, and you may open up and go with the flow of the stream dream. All these options and many, many more are available to you and suggest that you have free will to do as you please. But eventually, when you do choose to go with the flow of the stream, you'll find yourself returning to your true home in full conscious awareness of who you really are as God. And a quote from Byron Katie. Life is simple. Everything happens for you, not to you. Everything happens at exactly the right moment, neither too soon nor too late. You don't have to like it. It's just easier to do so. This means that certain things are meant to happen and will happen no matter what. We've all heard stories about people who smoked 3 packs of cigarettes all their lives and died peacefully in their sleep in their 90s, and other people who never smoked a cigarette in their lives and lived in an area where the air was clean and fresh and died of lung cancer in their 30s. These lives followed a specific pattern, and nothing could change what was to occur. When I was about 7 years of age, I went to a summer camp for the first time. I was given the top bed of a double bunk bed, and the kid who had the bottom bed loved to kick my mattress while I was on it and throw me into the air. Finally, after asking him to stop several times with no let-up in his bullying, I leaned over the side, holding in one hand an orange that I was about to eat. At that moment, he kicked the mattress again, and since there was no guardrails on the bunk beds in those days, I went head first over the side. The orange left my hand a split second before my descent to the floor, and my head landed directly on it, squashing the orange while slightly breaking my fall. I woke up in the camp infirmary later with a concussion, but under what you may think would be normal circumstances, I should have, at the very least, fractured my skull or broken my neck. But no, I was released later that evening and returned to my cabin with a slight headache. If it had been my time to go, this incident would certainly have taken me out of my body for good. But as it was, there was no sign of the injury until several years later, when I began to have neck problems. A stiff neck can be a symbol for stubborn character, and in my case, that was certainly true. As it turned out, I sustained injuries to my neck twice more in the next 15 years, which affected me severely for decades afterward, all pointing to the same message the self was trying to give me. Look at your stubbornness. What's beneath it? It's a block to the awareness of who you really are. I'll speak more on how the self constantly communicates with us later in the chapter entitled The Language of the Self. Identification. The concept of time speaks of past, present, and future, and the separated false self is created out of the time-space illusion by identifying with the past or history, as well as a hoped-for or feared future. This identification clothes itself in individuality, further validating its belief that it's separate. I am different from you and everybody and everything else. I am born here, educated there, believe this and that, have credentials that say I'm a doctor or lawyer or plumber or derelict or tyrant, etc. I have this experience and that expertise. I'm this or that race and color, and I possess these things. I'm a father or mother, and I have these many children, and many, many other things. Attention. The faculty of attention expands our experience, which becomes our reality as we continue to place our attention on the same things. This concept of reality gradually becomes who we believe we are, our identity. And on the masks go, sculpting what looks like a unique individual, beautiful or disgusting, judgeable in every sense, on an infinite scale of good and bad. These masks act like filters, influencing every experience with a giant palette of uniquely mixed colors in an endless cycle of judgment, which the false self likes to call perspectives or opinions, but are really the result of an insidious expanding conditioning that's taken over the decision-making of even the slightest choice from the infinite menu of already created things and experiences. The separated false self dwells within a prison, initially with the bars far enough out of view that it doesn't realize its every moment is manipulated by the devious influence of this mass conditioning. Limitation. The concept of a separate identity is joined at the hip with the belief in limitation, since it is time and space bound. The history of time seems to validate limitation in every way through the wars fought to gain control of this or that, from land to resources to beliefs, whether these wars are global or simply within one's own mind, arguing with itself. These inner wars can appear in as simple a way as indecision to full-blown schizophrenia. Space seems to validate limitation through the senses, which proclaim we have only one planet to live on with limited resources and expanding populations. There seems not to be enough to go around. This has not been a daily conscious thought for most people until recently with the addition of global communication systems like the Internet. But every separated false self has carried this belief around just beneath the surface of their awareness, generating constant fear in the form of stress, anxiety, that further taints its every choice. Limitation is a manipulative tool in the hands of those who seem to hold the reins of power, influencing everything from education to provide you with the tools to compete for your share of the limited pie, to self-improvement gurus who promote ways and means to be at the top of the heap and ensure a quality lifestyle. Attachments. When the separated false self feels it is limited, it interprets this as lack in whatever experience where it either does not have enough or it does not think it has enough. Having enough food, clothing, and shelter form the basic survival instincts of the separated false self, and whatever provides these things becomes the source of a powerful attachment. This is mine is the first feeling connected to these instincts, and since these attachments concern what the separated false self deems absolutely necessary for the continued existence of the body and mind, the attachment is so powerful that it will protect it to the death. Expectations. When you're identified with a separated false self who believes it has specific needs and limited resources to fulfill those needs, and a protective tendency toward what they have acquired to fulfill those needs, you come to expect those things to continue appearing in your experience. This is the false self's focus on expected outcomes, a fixation on results. It is a preoccupation on, I have to have this end result. The expectation, however, is laden with doubt, and that it may not be your experience, and a host of new fear-based tendencies are birthed out of this. Hope becomes what appears to be a positive tendency connected with expectations. Nevertheless, hope remains uncertain of outcomes, and has a subtle element of fear connected to it. Connected to hope are belief, faith, and trust. And since there's an underlying doubt, fear associated with them, they're often used in the control of the separated false self, most commonly through religious organizations, but also found in the media, politics, and elsewhere. It is normal to call your particular spiritual belief a faith. What is your faith? But religious or not, the concept of having hope, belief, faith, or trust in something is associated with expectations. The tendencies to have hope, belief, faith, or trust are very useful on the way to knowing. And I'm certainly not saying you should abandon anything. This book is not about trying to change anyone. It's about revealing the simplicity of becoming aware of the freedom that you are now. You may choose to continue using the old energy stair-step approach to your freedom, or simply go for it now. There's no right or wrong here. It's just another choice. Whatever your choice may be, when you combine your separated false self-identity with limitation, attachments, and expectations, you suffer. And it is that very suffering that eventually leads you to the door of, I choose freedom now, no matter what. In my own case, I gave my attention to being rich and recognized. For most of my life, I struggled to be successful, to be recognized, to be accepted, and to be appreciated, even celebrated. And yet most everything I tried to get me there never really interested me. And so the wealth, power, and fame that I yearned for eluded me for many years. Nevertheless, eventually I did find something that fired me up for a while, and I quickly became a multimillionaire, a big fish in a little pond. And there I basked in the glow of the glamorous life for well over a decade. And yet at the height of this so-called success, I felt empty and miserable. I had never asked myself why I wanted to be rich and recognized. As a result, I had created an identity that believed it could be happy if it possessed enough money and enough friends and admirers. But what I really wanted beneath the surface of attention was to feel safe and loved. These are aspects of the essence of how we all feel when we're aware of who we really are. And when this awareness returns, we have consciously returned home to the truth, that we are God. In summary, your false self-identity is made up of a multitude of masks combined with the feeling of limitation you get by living in this time and space-bound separated belief, and the tendency toward attachments and expectations that limitation encourages make up the conditioning that you believe defines you. Choosing freedom. So after 23 years of spiritual seeking and at the top of my so-called worldly power, in 1999 I said, I choose freedom no matter what. And I'll explain what no matter what turned out to be for me later on. Then I chucked it all and jumped off the cliff of self-discovery, the most direct route to freedom I had ever found at that point or since. I had not consciously intended to let all my wealth just evaporate, but the real self had an open door now to orchestrate my life seamlessly towards freedom, and in my case that required that I let go of everything. Here's what my life looked like. On January 4th, 1999, I had a yearly income that had just hit $600,000, or about $1 million in today's money. I lived in a 3,500 square foot house in Toronto and a 5,000 square foot house in the country on 10 acres, and my business was worth about $10 million, according to a business formula my chartered accountant had given to me. I regularly hung out with millionaires and a few billionaires, and I attended lavish parties in Beverly Hills, Hawaii, Miami, and other exotic places. I had it all and could do whatever I wanted, buy whatever I desired, and go wherever I pleased. And yet, despite decades of spiritual seeking and into my third marriage, my life was empty and miserable. So on January 5th, 1999, I walked away from it all. And here's a quote from Nisargadatta. As long as you're interested in your present way of living, you will not abandon it. Discovery cannot come as long as you cling to the familiar. It is only when you fully realize the immense sorrow of your life and revolt against it that a way can be found out. You could say that I had lost my mind, but that took several more years and a fourth marriage, this time to Kali Ma, the ego slayer or false self-killer. It took another 15 years in that hellish world to strip away every layer of identity before I fell fully into the arms of truth and realized that I had always been free, something everyone can do in this new energy almost immediately. This simple but beautiful quote you may be familiar with from the Sufi poet Rumi describes my experience perfectly. I've lived on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. It opens, and I've been knocking from the inside. Self-discovery is a pathless path, without practices, modalities, disciplines, self-denial, or time-bound concepts. It means becoming consciously aware of who you really are, now. And for most people, this means recognizing who they are not. Self-discovery or self-inquiry goes straight into conditioning, unprotected, vulnerable, transparent, and authentic. It goes beyond all concepts of being awakened only on a material level, as so many spiritual people are. It means being fully open and naked, hiding nothing, and feeling everything that comes up that is ready to be transformed. When you accept that you've been living in a dream, you have taken a very fast and direct route to becoming the witness in the audience of your own movie dream. And from that position of freedom, you watch, but you do not buy into it. It's what Jesus meant when he said, being in the world, but not of it. He also said, you will do what I've done, and greater things will you do. He knew who he was, and came to tell and show humanity that we are exactly the same as he. Oneness is not God and something else, only God, and we are it. That was his message and every master's message before and since. My message is the same, and it is the message of the Golden Age. You are God. Self-discovery asks you to look straight in the face of this truth, now, in this new energy, in the first few days of the Golden Age, with no fear of being burned at the stake, as you give your attention to and declare the truth, I am that I am, knowing that it will expand in your awareness, and therefore in your experience, now, not in some distant unknown future when you so-called qualify. Now here are some quotes that I'd like to give you with regard to the discussion on illusion earlier. This one's from A Course in Miracles that says, nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. This means that anything which can be threatened is not real. In this understanding, anything which has a beginning and an ending can be threatened and is therefore not real. And also, according to string theory, the universe is a conscious hologram, and that reality is a projected illusion within the hologram. And then from the ancient Upanishads, which speak of Maya, which means illusion, where things appear to be present but are not what they seem. But let's look at the other side of it. What is unreal does emanate from a temporary extension of you to you, God to God, and appears on the screen of consciousness. As such, there is a realness to it. This is a divine dichotomy and cannot be explained. I will end this chapter with a quote from Mooji. The universal tendency in human beings is to seek lasting happiness in the field of names and forms, a transient field. Because they believe this is all there is, they look for happiness by immersing themselves in experience after experience, therapy after therapy, workshop after workshop, even spiritual ones, which all sound so promising but never really address the present. This is really a form of avoidance, a distraction from what is timelessly unchanging and ever perfect within ourselves. Ignorance of the truth is the main cause of misery.